Good evening. I'm Ellen Smith, a member of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto. Welcome to this educational presentation on the pros and cons of the ballot measures that are up for this November 3rd election. The League was formed in 1920 after women gained the right to vote. So this year we are celebrating both our 100th anniversary and that of the passage of the 19th Amendment. The League does not support or oppose political parties or candidates for office, but we do work to empower voters. Our organization has two distinct roles. One is advocacy for public policy positions that we have studied and support. The other is voter service, bringing voters impartial information on candidates and issues. This is the hat we are wearing tonight, namely to educate citizens about the issues before you can cast your ballot. Our speakers have studied the text of all the measures and reviewed the content about them in newspapers, websites, and other sources, as well as having discussions among League members across the state. They're prepared to give you the facts about the measures and share the opinions of opponents and supporters without prejudice. Let me tell you how we will proceed. First, our speakers will provide you with some useful information about elections and an overview of the presentation. Then we will address each ballot measure, its background, what it would do if it passed, and arguments from both sides in favor of and against the measure. If you have questions, please utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and type in your question. The chat function is not activated. After each measure is discussed, I will ask the presenter to answer as many questions as time allows before we move on to the next measure. If all goes as anticipated, plan on about an hour to cover the 12 state and 3 local measures. So now we'll get started. Our speakers tonight are Kevin Ma and Katie Talbot. And so go ahead, Kevin, let's begin.
Okay, my name is Kevin Ma, and I'll start off with how to vote in the first place. So election day is November 3rd, and it ends 8 p.m. on November 3rd. However, ballots are mailed since Sunday, so some of you actually probably got yours either on Monday or now, or eventually get it within the week. With that ballot, you will be able to fill out your selection and then drop it off at either a ballot drop box, which are usually found in the libraries or the city hall. The mail-in ballots are also work because each envelope is postage paid. However, with all of these, you need to make sure that if you are submitting the envelope, you need to be able to sure you're signing it on the back. That is the most common reason why your vote will be rejected, is if that is not there. That being said, you can also vote at a vote center. Vote centers will only be available 3 days before the election, so that would be Halloween, and they can be found online at the Registrar of Voters website, which is the one you see on this link, as well as sccvote.org. You'll be if you have special needs or you have messed up your ballot somehow, you can also go to the vote center to fix those mistakes and address those concerns. You can also go to the vote center if you failed to have registered by October 9th. Instead, you'll be given a conditional vote of which they would verify later to see if you're eligible to vote and then count it. So your vote count will be slightly delayed. You can also search your registration online at the website on screen or again, sccvote.org. This year, because everything is also done vote by mail, you can also track your ballot online at the website from the Registrar of Voters or from the Secretary of State's office website, which is where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov. There's no apostrophes, all one word. There you can also get notices of if your ballot has been received and if it has counted. So vote early, so if there's any kind of mistakes or issues, the Registrar of Voters can reach out to you and get it corrected. Today we'll be going over through 15 propositions. There will be 12 statewide and 3 local. The 12 statewides are sectioned into themes, ranging from civil rights to regulations, and 3 local measures will be carried on at the end. The voting rules for this election season is that for all the state propositions, they will just need a simple majority to be enacted. As for the local measures, because of the way they're written, they're all 2/3 required. We'll be also providing the amounts that the supporters and opponents have contributed in their campaigns for these measures. These contributions are all up to date as of September 10th due to campaign filing deadlines. There will be changes as more deadlines pass. And we'll begin with civil rights propositions. The civil rights proposition here is Prop 16, which is a proposition to legalize affirmative action. In 1996, under the Pete Wilson administration, we had voters approve Prop 209. 209 prohibited a discrimination or preference based off race, sex, color, ethnicity, gender, or country of origin in any form of government contract, education, and employment, which led to a lot of programs getting cut or modified so it can be work with this new proposition that was a constitution amendment. As a result, we have this proposition, which would completely repeal what 209 did. As such, this means this proposition is also a constitutional amendment. And as such, if you vote yes on this, it will allow for affirmative action policies to be implemented. As a result, there's also no fiscal impacts directly from this proposition because all of the fiscal impacts would require each individual government agency to make their own policies that may or may not require some kind of direct cash input. Supporters have said that this proposition is required because it will assist the government in fighting racial inequities, as we have seen with the recent protests, and that all of us deserve equal opportunities and a quality education, which may require some targeted outreach, such as a scholarship based off of a race or ethnicity, for instance. Opponents, on the other hand, say that the answer for discrimination is not more discrimination, and that we should be making programs that are directly targeted to things like income level or location. Supporters have contributed $10 million so far. Opponents have contributed $175,000, and this proposition was placed on the ballot by the state legislature. Are there any questions?
There don't seem to be any questions. Let me remind you that if, as you are hearing about the proposition, you have a question, go ahead and type it in the Q&A. If you think of one later and you want to put the question in, we may have time to come back to it. Be sure you put the number of the proposition that you have your question about. So we'll go on now. Thank you. Kate.
Okay, this is Prop 17, Voting Rights for People on Parole. And the way it is now is if you are in prison or on parole, you may not vote or run for office. But if you're in county jail on probation or post-release community supervision, yes, you may vote. So this proposition, Proposition 17, will restore voting rights to people who have completed their prison term. And it will also allow them to run for office as long as they are otherwise qualified for that office. The fiscal impact amounts to hundreds of thousands of dollars for updating voter registration materials and registering the individuals, the 50,000 individuals who are currently disenfranchised because we do not allow people who finished a felony term, we do not allow them to vote currently. Proponents say that these 50,000 Californians are members of our community. They hold jobs, they pay taxes, and their voices should be heard. In addition, civic engagement reduces recidivism by a factor of 3. Thank you for the slide change. 19 other states automatically re-enfranchise voters when they complete their prison terms. And we in California are one of only 3 states that bar parolees from voting. Opponents say that parole is part of the penalty and the right to vote should not be reinstated until the parole is finished. Any questions on Proposition 17?
I see no questions, so let's move on.
Okay, we'll move on to Proposition 18, and I will tell you about this one too. This is primary voting for 17-year-olds, and the way it is now, you must be 18 years old to cast a ballot under any circumstances, in either special or general elections or primaries. Proposition 18 will allow 17-year-olds who will be 18 by the time the general election arrives to cast a ballot in the primary. This impacts about 100,000 17-year-olds who are currently pre-registered to vote, but will be 18 by the time November 3rd rolls around. The fiscal impacts again amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars to redesign registration materials and to register these 100,000 17-year-olds who would be ready to vote this year. Proponents say that 17-year-olds, they work, they pay taxes, and in fact, they can even join the military. These 17-year-olds are in a position and mature enough to understand what they're voting on. In addition, allowing them to vote will increase youth participation, which is sadly very low. Opponents say that 17-year-olds are just too immature to vote and should not be voting on taxation issues, and also are overly influenced by their teachers and parents. So yes, any questions on Proposition 18?
Okay. We have no questions.
Okay.
And we're moving on to our statewide solo bond proposition. Prop 14 is a stem cell research institute bond. So in 2004, Californians passed Prop 71, which both codified in the state constitution that Californians have the right to research on stem cell projects, because at the time in the Bush administration, there was at the national level. This proposition created an institute called the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine to issue $3 billion worth of bonds to projects that research and as well as to facility upgrades to assist the research. It's now 2020 and there's only $30 million left. And so we have this bond. A yes vote on this bond would allow this institute to issue $5.5 billion worth of bonds over a span of around 10 to a few years, with $1.5 billion restricted to brain and nerve research. This also limits the amount of money that can be used from the bond issuance to pay for administrative costs from running this institute. It also makes a few personnel changes to the governance board, such as creating a new sub-board to focus on trying to get these treatment outcomes to more people. So basically an access question. The repayments are around $260 million a year for 30 years, or to make a total of $7.8 billion. The amount paid per year is less than 1% of the general fund. Supporters say that stem cell research is still necessary, is untapped field, and that basic research should always be continued. And that with the money, you can also get matching grants, which has allowed the original bond and money from the original bond to actually generate around $10 billion in stimulus. Opponents, on the other hand, say that the Bush administration restrictions were actually lifted during the Obama administration, so there's nothing stopping the federal government and private groups from funding this research, and that given our current economic climate, we should probably use that money elsewhere. There has been a campaign on the supporter side that has contributed $6.6 million, and there has been zero on the opponent side. This proposition was brought up by the original person who created Prop 71, who also chairs the body, Robert Klein. So that's a yes vote would issue these bonds, a no vote would not. Are there any questions on Prop 14?
Yes, we do have some questions. One of the questions goes back to a previous measure. We'll save that for the end. Another asks if the slides will be available. This session is being recorded and will be available on the League's website. I do not know if the slides themselves will be available, but we can look into that.